Hello, Phantom fans. My name is Sam Olmstead. His name is Justin Irwin. This is the Dump and Chase podcast. So instead of my typical monologue that I do at the beginning of these shows, I'm going straight to my co-host, Justin. So coming into Friday night, there were 9 players on the scratch list, 3 affiliates are called up, and the Phantoms have an e-bug or emergency backup goalie on the bench. Not only do they win, they look good doing it. Then on Saturday, still 9 players on the scratch list, e-bug on the bench, 2 affiliates went back to their team, leaving the Phantoms with 11 forwards and 5 defensemen, and get a shutout anchored by a backup goaltender who, up until this weekend, had struggled in his first USHL season. I mean, the events of this past weekend, have you seen anything like this before?
I mean, I've seen goaltenders get hot in situations like this. I've seen the team shorthanded. Kind of to see all of this come together in one game was a little unprecedented, I would say. But you saw the results. I'm pretty pleased with how things went. So, yeah, it was crazy, but we won.
And add into all of that a less than ideal ice surface over the course of the weekend.
Yeah, you could kind of see late Friday, I think. I started noticing, it just didn't look right. Looked great kind of to start Friday, but then went downhill from there. And then, Saturday it was a swamp.
Yeah, it's the official word that we got. One of the fiddleators on the something or other that keeps the ice frozen and not a giant 1-inch deep swimming pool was not operating correctly. And in order to fix it, they had to shut the whole system down and obviously couldn't do that while the game was going on. So I'll say right off the bat, great job to the ice crew for doing practically everything they could to keep the ice somewhat playable to be able to get through that game on Saturday, because it was a mess out there.
Yeah, I think second intermission, Zamboni
had Niagara Falls coming out the front of it.
Yeah, mounds of slush in the middle of the ice, but they got it out, so stick taps to them. It was playable, maybe not fun, but I think that worked for us.
Okay, so we're going to have a lot to talk about as far as this past weekend. Plus, we've made a change to 4 points that will be coming up later in the show. And a trip to Chicago is in the cards for the Phantoms this coming weekend. So yeah, a lot to talk about. Justin, did you eat your Wheaties today?
Yeah, if you mean had a lot of coffee, I'm good.
I would contest that maybe like Lucky Charms or Captain Crunch would be the more breakfast of champions, but sure, Wheaties took the title. So as always, at the top of the show, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the official sponsor of the Dump and Chase podcast, the fine staff at Advanced Podiatry. For over 35 years, Dr. Ashdown and Dr. Carnivus has been treating the little piggies of the Mahoning Valley. Because let's face it, typically your little piggies go to the market or have roast beef. Sometimes they find the leg of your coffee table in the dark at 3 a.m., and instead of crying wee, 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 you cry out curse words that haven't been invented yet. I'm talking words that would make a Marine blush. So if this has happened to you recently, make sure to go check out advancedpodiatry.com to find a location near you. So before we take our first break, we wanted to thank you for tuning in, whether on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, or on Western Reserve Radio. How about that flashy new board ad for Western Reserve Radio on the boards at Covelli?
Yeah, that was kind of neat. Kind of there at center ice. So that's cool.
No, we just need to work on getting the podcast ad up there on the boards. We may have to take up a collection for that to work something out there. But so when we come back, we're going to dive into probably one of the more memorable weekends in Covelli Centre history. And we're back. So this last weekend, the Cedar Rapids Rough Riders came to town. And not to be minimized with everything going on, they did have COVID issues of their own. Both of their games the weekend before were postponed, and they had 6 players on their scratch list both nights this past weekend, all listed as being due to illness. So Youngstown definitely had it a little harder than Cedar Rapids did, but Youngstown was not the only team dealing with this on the ice this past weekend. All right, so just diving straight into the games on Friday. As far as the scoring recap, the first period, Cedar Rapids gets the first goal of the game. That came at the 11:04 mark. That was Martin Lavens, his first of the season, I believe the first of his USHL career, but we can let their podcast deal with that. Do they have one? No, they don't have one.
No.
Oh, well, just don't care as much as we do. So Cedar Rapids takes a 1-0 lead. At 17:15 of the period on the power play, Shane LaChance picks up his second of the season from Trey Taylor and Nick Williams, tying the game up at 1. And just a minute, 14 seconds later, Justin Varner, his seventh of the season, that was unassisted, giving Youngstown a 2-1 lead. Now, I say unassisted unless you count the backside or the skate of Cedar Rapids goaltender Gino Pecora. I'm not sure which that banked off of. I wasn't there to see. I probably would have had a better view if I was sitting there, but I was at home watching that one.
Yeah, it looked like his right skate to me.
And if that name does sound familiar, Gino Pecora was selected by the Phantoms in last season's dispersal draft, but ended up never appearing with the Phantoms. But yeah, again, Youngstown takes a 2-1 lead into the intermission. The second period, only the one goal at 9 minutes, 21 seconds. Adam Ingram picked up his 15th of the season from Carter Rose, giving Youngstown a 3-1 lead, and that was all they would need. That finishes out the scoring for the game. No goals in the third. So yeah, Youngstown wins 3-1. Shots in the game, Cedar Rapids held the lead there 26-21. Owen Bartoszewicz getting the starts in both games this weekend, stopped 25 of 26. This was his first win since October 1st, which was a 7-4 win over the U17s. Special teams, Youngstown on the power play was 1 for 5. Cedar Rapids was 0 for 5. And we talked about affiliates being called up this weekend. We saw Brandon Svoboda, Justin Stupka, and E-Bug Justin Ennis. All three were called up from the Pens Elite U18. We also saw Skogan Schrott, who was called up from the Florida Alliance 16U. Brandon and Justin, they were only there for the game on Friday. They weren't there on Saturday. Ennis was on the bench all weekend. We saw Skogan Schrott all weekend. Svoboda, Stupka, and Schrott were all Phantoms draft picks this past summer. So this was our first time getting to see them. And interestingly enough, in this game, maybe instead of kind of messing around with all four lines, they just put all three of the affiliates as the fourth line, as the forward line. And shockingly, I mean, they didn't get a ton of ice time, but shockingly enough, they actually worked pretty well as a unit. There was nothing glaring that they did that really hurt the team during this game.
No. In fact, they kind of got in the mix physically. I remember there was one kind of scrum. I think it was in the second period. And I think Schrott was the littlest guy on the ice, and I think he was leading the charge into the scrum. So, but yeah, it was just a well-played game. Trey Taylor's assist in the first period was one of the prettier passes we've seen in a while. Bardo gets his first win at home, I think. Yeah. The other one was in Plymouth. So, yeah, just a solid win, shorthanded, and thinking positive. Things were going to be getting better the next night, hopefully. And, well.
Yeah, so going into the game on Saturday, two less affiliates, kind of a player or two swapping on the scratch list. Yeah, so we saw going into this game, the Phantoms only with 11 forwards. If you go back and listen to on the Phantoms YouTube page, Brad Patterson's post-game comments talked about Adam Ingram having to double shift to help fill out some lines, so they could run four lines. So yeah, 11 forwards, only 5 defensemen, which did go down to 4 there for a little bit, in kind of a scary moment where it looks like Trey Taylor took a stick or something to the face. Left the ice for a handful of minutes. Thankfully, he was back on the bench pretty quick. And yeah, and we had said, we better hope the Phantoms get out to some kind of a lead because there's going to be some tired defensemen on the ice towards the end of the game. And we saw that towards the end of the game. But thankfully, Bartoszewicz was up to the task. But getting into this game, again, the scoring recap in the first period, the Phantoms pick up the first and only goal of the first period at 6:35. Evan Werner, his 6th of the season, with the assist going to Shane LaChance and Ryan Alexander. That gave Youngstown a 1-0 lead. That holds until the 14-12 mark of the second period. Adam Ingram picking up his 16th of the season from Winter Wallace and Steven Sardarian. Youngstown goes up 2-0. That holds until the third period, where Shane LaChance finishes it off, his third of the season from Adam Ingram and TJ Schweighardt. That one was on the power play, giving the Phantoms a 3-0 lead. And that's how the game would end. The Phantoms' first shutout in over 2 years, even longer than that as far as at home. So yeah, the shots in this game, Cedar Rapids, again, getting the better of the Youngstown there, 35-23. Youngstown on the power play in this game was 1 for 4. Cedar Rapids was 0 for 3. Owen Bartoszewicz stopped 35 of 35. That's his first USHL shutout. And as far as his record on the season, his record now improves to 3 wins, 6 losses, an overtime loss, and a shootout loss, with a 3.32 goals against average and an 889 save percentage. So one number went down by a good bit after this weekend. One number went up by a good bit, both in a good way. So, I mean, just something to be said that basically, Bardo had to have the 2 best games of his USHL career this weekend for the Phantoms to have a chance, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, no argument there. Obviously, the key to the Phantoms winning was him, putting up a brick wall. Sometimes he was scrambling a little bit, but he got the job done, and it was just one of those moments, maybe someday we'll look back at this and, that was the beginning of something.
So something that came up this weekend that has been fairly uncommon in the past is the concept of an emergency backup goalie, or what you'll hear us refer to as an e-bug. The question that got asked a lot over the weekend was, what's the difference between a backup and an emergency backup? So after the game, I posed this question to Coach Patterson, and this is what he had to say.
Yeah, so emergency is, the rule on an emergency, you can bring in anybody as long as they're not on somebody's list, like another team in our league's list. But that emergency backup, they couldn't play unless there was an injury. Whereas, you have affiliate lists, like we have some guys on the affiliate list. This was kind of a sudden thing. Like we didn't know this was going to happen until the day before. And thankfully there's a great program down in Pittsburgh and some great goaltenders that have been in practice with us before. So bringing him in, we know he's capable, and knock on wood, you don't want something to go down with your goalie, but having a program like that close by sure has helped. But the difference from an emergency to a backup or whatever, the emergency can't play unless it's really an emergency.
And there you go. So we're going to take another break, and when we come back, it'll be time for the new and improved 4 points. And we're back, and it's time for 4 points. This is where we break down the previous weekend into 4 categories: what we liked, what we didn't like, favorite moment, and we say goodbye to weekend MVP and welcome in the Dump and Chase podcast 3 stars of the week. And this week, we're going to flip a coin to see who goes first. Justin, call it.
Tails.
Oh, it's heads.
You didn't even have a coin.
No, see, now we're just arguing semantics, but this week I'll be going first. Okay, so getting into 4 points, as far as what I liked, and when I say this, I don't say this in an insulting fashion, but what needed to happen this weekend was the supporting players on this team needed to step up, and that's what they did. And when I say supporting players, it's no big secret. There's just kind of been this small core of players on this team who has made up most of the offense for the Phantoms this year. And you've seen players in these other roles that maybe isn't showing up on the score sheet, but are contributing in other ways. But this weekend, we needed them to step up, contribute offensively to something you could visibly see on the scoreboard. And that's exactly what they did. That's exactly what we needed. And it just came down to the Phantoms were dealt a lot of bad hands this weekend, and a lot of things had to go right in order for them to get out of this weekend with 4 points. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah. I mean, that will reflect, I think, in the 3-star segment. We got a good group of players. Finally, a couple of guys said, hey, I'm going to put it in myself. What I liked, the shutout. You mentioned it's been kind of a long time since we last got a shutout. Not that anybody is actually counting, but 771 days since the last shutout. November 29th of 2019. The last home shutout, 1,008 days. April 6th, 2019. That's a lot of days, man. So, yeah. The last home shutout was Christian Stover. So that should tell you how long it's been.
I will say, for one fact, when you look through the scores every weekend, I would say in the past couple seasons, you don't see a lot of shutouts.
No. The shooting in the league is pretty high caliber. And, yeah, European goalies kind of got run out. So, that's my 2 cents.
When you look back a handful of years ago, in that one season, Wouter Peters had like 3 shutouts.
Oh, what was wrong with those teams?
But I'm just saying, in the last couple of years, you just don't see shutouts like you used to. They're very far and few between now.
Yeah, and it's been fairly far for the Phantoms, but we got that one off the list, so it just felt really good seeing that 0 up there on the board when the buzzer blew.
Well, now the next streak we're looking at would be winning 3 games in a row. Which I pointed out on Twitter a couple weeks ago, the Phantoms have not done since I believe it was February of 2020. So we're coming up on 2 years on that since the Phantoms have won 3 games in a row. They didn't do it at all last season. So yeah, you had to go back to the season before, right before the pandemic shut everything down. Yeah, because right now, the Phantoms are on a 5-game point streak right now. This is their second one of the season.
Yeah.
So you had a couple of wins, I believe a couple of wins, and then the overtime loss in Muskegon, and now a couple wins this past weekend. So this is another 5-game point streak for the Phantoms.
But the middle game was an overtime loss.
Yes, that's the way it was the last time it happened earlier in the season. So I'm copping out on the next one as far as what I didn't like. There's some stuff I could have pointed out, but just overall, given the circumstances of the weekend, I don't think I can point anything. I can't think of anything that I could point out. Everything kind of has a caveat to it where this was this way, but people were missing, or lines were all jumbled up. People were double shifting, triple shifting, and for me, I don't think it'd be fair to throw anything out here, when we know kind of the circumstances behind of why it was that way to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, there is not a lot to dislike here. Obviously, we only gave up 1 goal over the weekend. If I have to pick anything, I thought there was some penalty issues. We gave them 5 power plays in Friday's game. They didn't score on any of them, but you're still kind of wearing your guys down. We only gave up 3 on Saturday, but 1 was a major midway through the 3rd period. A defenseman, no less. Nick Williams took a spearing major, and I've reviewed it. It might not have warranted a major in my opinion, but it was a spear. So,
and the fact it happened with a linesman and a referee
right there,
both within like 2 feet of it happening.
Yeah.
So they got a pretty good view of it. Whatever they saw, or whatever they felt that they saw, they had a fairly close up view of it.
Even if it was only a 2, you're still going to get that 10-minute misconduct at that point. And when you've only got 5 defensemen, a defenseman can't do that. So, and Nick had played already, a really good weekend. He was one of those players who, stepping up. He's getting a lot more minutes on that Saturday game, and kind of really stepping into the role. But you can't take that penalty.
Moving on to my favorite moment of the weekend, quite frankly, to me, the final horn on Saturday. The horn was a little sickly sounding. There were issues with the actual horn. It may or may not have been a sound being played from the audio booth that sounded like a boat coming into harbor more than what it had sounded like before. But no, once that final horn went off on Saturday, even as a fan sitting there watching, you really felt this sense of accomplishment for what the team did over that weekend. That's a lot of adversity to overcome. Maybe a lot of guys playing outside of their comfort zone. But at the same time, maybe that was a good thing. Maybe just kind of these back and forth weekends that we have of maybe guys just getting a little too comfortable out there and not pushing themselves. And we saw an entire weekend where a lot of these guys had to push themselves in ways they haven't had to so far this season. I hope that they look back on that and see the results of what happened when they did that, and can keep that mindset going forward, that maybe getting into your comfort zone in these games maybe is not the best thing. Because this weekend proved it otherwise.
Yeah. Obviously, these guys had to work a lot harder, fill roles that they're not used to. So it definitely, is a team building experience, I think. For me, favorite moment, you can pick and choose from everything on the ice, a lot of great hockey being played. But it was really just kind of fun sitting over there, kind of catty corner from the band. Walked in on Saturday, there's the Boardman marching band. And, you always know there's going to be a lot of energy in the building when they're in. And, atmosphere.
Yeah.
They're good. They are damn good.
Yeah, I was informed a while back in November, that the Boardman band was slated to be there for Military Appreciation Night, which is what, Saturday was. And the Phantoms, as always, did a really great job with that. Yeah, so the word I had gotten back in November was that the Boardman Marching Band would be back for that. And yeah, we've had other bands there, and no offense to them, but Boardman band is good. They're also large.
Yeah.
They create a noise that can fill the Covelli Centre. They have a great song selection. This is all coming from somebody who was a band nerd for 5 years in high school. Proudly, I might add, proudly a band nerd for 5 years in high school, I will add.
Yeah, I would have been in marching band, but for one, I sucked at the instruments I chose, and B, I'm not very coordinated, so marching is out of the question. But yeah, they're the best high school band, I think, probably in this area, and it's just always really great to have them in the building.
All right, so moving on to something new in 4 points. In the past, we've always done Weekend MVP, where we each select one player. More often than not, we'd end up selecting the same player, and one of us would just kind of go off to select another one, just so we weren't always repeating each other's answers. So to rectify that, we have a new feature here in 4 points. So the Weekend MVP is gone. It is now the 3 stars of the week. And funny enough, actually, this first time around, I thought maybe introducing an extra name, and this is something that we both agree on. We don't each have our own list. We went through this list together.
Yeah.
Then it gets to the point where naming, 1/4 of the roster, if we go that route. But no, we, both came up with this list together. So this is our first official 3 stars of the week. The 3rd star is going to Evan Werner. Did not play on Friday, was back in the lineup on Saturday. 6 goals in his last 8 games played. We see kids get better throughout the season. From the beginning of the season to the end of season, we've seen Evan take leaps and bounds in this league just in the past month and a half. He is a completely different player now to what he was 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, so we noticed, he had been picking his game up before we started that, long road break. He got his first goal there at American Cup in Rochester, and just really started to, pick it up week by week, step by step. And definitely this weekend, he was a big part of the offense.
So our 2nd star of the week goes to Shane LaChance. And again, this is not meant as an insult, but when I referred earlier to as far as the supporting players on this team, that was more of a role I felt like Shane LaChance filled on this team. He stepped up in a big way this past weekend, 2 goals and an assist over the 2 games. He took more of a leading role on the ice. At the same time, he's a very big boy. Saw him in the back after the game on Saturday. I had neck cramps for about an hour looking up at him as he went by. But no, because with Cedar Rapids, you're going to see a lot of scraps. You're going to see a lot of after the whistle, shenanigans going on. And anytime Shane was on the ice and something like that started, he immediately put himself into the middle of it, kind of jumping in, helping out his teammates. And it's, on the one hand, yes, you saw him in a lot of, just kind of a lot of these little scraps after whistles. But a lot of it was him just kind of stepping in the middle of it. Yeah, when it's all said and done, he was one of those ones, I think with the exception of the 1st star, that probably stepped up their game the most this past weekend.
And what you said earned him the 2nd star. I'll also throw on top of that he did get 2 goals on the weekend. both on the power play. The first one, a really nice one-timer, great cannon there. The second one, just using that big frame, get in front of the net, and you get a tip. You can't get any better than that. So, yeah, definitely earned the second star there.
And our first star of the weekend, the inaugural first star, that, of course, goes to Owen Bartoszewicz. Again, like I said, he had to step up in a big way this weekend, having an e-bug behind him on the bench. It was pretty much going, barring injury, it was going to be up to him no matter what. He stepped up in a big way. I believe, stopping 59 of 60 or 60 of 61 shots?
60 of 61.
60 of 61, only allowing the one goal. That works out to a 984 save percentage on the weekend?
Yeah, it was something like that. Had that worked out somewhere.
But yeah, this was, and he's, and Owen's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, he was, the all NAHL, first all rookie team or first all team or whatever, first all rookie team.
Yeah.
Last year in the NAHL, I mean, and look at the NAHL, it's a fairly big league, and he, picked up that spot. I mean, he's nothing to sneeze at. And, and we see this with younger goaltenders coming into the league. There's going to be that time of struggles as they adapt to, the next rung up the ladder, and we've seen that from him this season. I think his confidence is going to be through the roof coming out of this weekend. And, you brought up the point in your recap article. If the Phantoms get Kyle Chevette back for this series with Chicago coming up, who do they go with on Friday? Are they going back to Chevette Friday and Saturday, give Bartoszewicz a breather, or do they play the hot hand? And at the end of the day, that going into Chicago, that is a really good problem to have.
Yeah. Another thing I'd like to point out: the one goal that Bartoszewicz did let in, that was the first goal on Friday, the only goal. Cedar Rapids scored first. We've seen in the past, not just Bartoszewicz, but a lot of goaltenders. You give up that early goal in one of those games, and, number 2 and 3 are, following pretty close behind. Not this weekend. He let that one in, and the next 60, he said no. So,
well, that goal too was somebody just throwing the puck at the net from a bad angle and just kind of, I don't know, hitting his shoulder and rolling down his back and into the net. I mean, it wasn't somebody squaring up on a shot, from in between the circles and getting it past them. It was just kind of one of those, fluky, pinball goals that ended up happening.
He was falling backward at the time.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can't even really blame that goal on him. It's just kind of a fluke thing that happened.
No, and he got up and, he shrugged it off, and that was it. The next 60 were denied.
Okay, so Justin, before we move on to next week, do you have any final thoughts on what we witnessed Friday and Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it a couple of times. I think it bears repeating. I haven't felt this proud as a fan coming out of a weekend in quite a long time. It was just, the way these guys pulled together. It was something special. It was, a weekend that we're going to remember. And there were a lot of fans in attendance. We had a pretty decent crowd for Youngstown at this time. That helps a lot. And just one of those things. We're gonna be talking about this probably for a few years. So.
Okay, so when we come back, we're looking ahead to another Phantoms road trip. This time to the Windy City and 2 games with the Eastern Conference leading Chicago Steel. And we're back. So this weekend, the Phantoms will be traveling up to Chicago for 2 more games with the Chicago Steel. This will be the 3rd and 4th meeting with Chicago this season. The first meeting was on Halloween, October 31st. That was a 5-1 win for the Phantoms. And then they met again on November 27th. That was an 8-4 loss for the Phantoms. So Chicago last weekend, they were at Green Bay. They split that series. They won on Friday and then lost in overtime on Saturday. So coming into this weekend, Chicago has a record of 20 wins, 5 losses, and 6 overtime losses. That is good for 46 points and first place in the Eastern Conference. Youngstown finally getting above the 500 mark. It's been a little while, but here we are. Youngstown with a record of 12 wins, 11 losses, 2 overtime losses, and 3 shootout losses. That works out to 29 points and currently 5th in the Eastern Conference. Only 1 point behind Madison for 4th place. And right now, Youngstown has 3 games in hand on Madison. And quite frankly, Madison is in absolute free fall in the standings. They going back to the end of November, middle to end of November, they've only won like 4 games. They've been on a very bad slide the last month and a half, almost 2 months. So the question, when was Madison going to come back to earth after the start of the season they had? Now, this is about the time they've come back down to earth. So Youngstown's sitting in 5th. They're not that far off from 1st or 4th.
Yeah,
they're not that far off from 4th.
Wishful thinking. So, yeah, but as we've seen with Madison, other teams, things can change rather quickly and rather dramatically in this league. Look what's happened with Madison. Other teams have gone up and down. So, just keep playing our game. We know Chicago's a good team. They're not as good as they were last year. They're a little bit more vulnerable, and the first 2 meetings have been pretty even. 1 win, 1 loss, 9 goals aside. We need to play our game and not worry about what the standings are.
Okay, so Chicago on the season, talking about scoring goals, Chicago on the season, they are averaging 4.32 goals per game. They are giving up 3.35 goals per game. Right now, they are sitting with a plus 30 goal differential. Youngstown on the season, averaging 3.14 goals per game, giving up 3.21 goals per game. Right now, sitting at a negative 2 goal differential. So they got up to even, started to go the other way in the negative, starting to work it back towards the positive again, especially after this past weekend. Special teams, Chicago on the power play, 29.3%. That is good for 1st in the East. Their penalty kill, pretty good as well, 77.3%. That is good for 3rd in the East. Youngstown, their power play, 22.1%, just still hovering around that number. We just can't seem to get away from 22.1. I'd have to go back and look. The past so many times I've said that in a preview, it's been that number. But yeah, Youngstown's sitting 4th in the Eastern Conference. The penalty kill finally creeped its way back up after this past weekend, 71.9%. That moves them up to 6th in the Eastern Conference. A couple mentions as far as the Chicago Steel, of course, Jackson Blake. He is tied for the USHL scoring lead. He is tied with Dubuque's Stephen Halliday, both with 49 points. Jackson Blake, 18 goals, 31 assists. Very dangerous player, somebody that you have to watch out for, you have to account for on the ice. Another one of Chicago's players, Adam Fantilli, he was out last weekend due to injury. Whether that translates to this weekend, we have no clue. Beyond the rivalry and everything else, Adam Fantilli is an incredible player. We wish him all the best. We hope he gets healthy. We just hope he gets healthy on Sunday.
Get well soon-ish.
Yeah. Take the weekend off, rest up. All the best to you. So both of these games on Friday and Saturday, that is an 8:05 puck drop. That is our time. Both of these games are available on Hockey TV. The games will be called by Mark Citron for Chicago. So if you're watching on Hockey TV, the mute button is down in the corner, down in the right-hand corner, just to let you know, you'll probably be looking for it.
And unless you like listening to the audio from the Discovery Channel.
Yeah, the Mutual of Omaha wildlife noises. Yeah. So
Marty Stauffer's Wild America for some of you older folk.
All right, so we're going to take one more break, and when we come back, we'll wrap up this episode and preview next week's show. And that's all we have for this week. Make sure to tune in next week when we recap the Chicago games and look ahead to the next weekend's trip to Muskegon for a pair of games with the Lumberjacks. Again, we want to thank our sponsor, Advanced Podiatry. To find location and appointment information, please be sure to visit advancedpodiatry.com. So as always, the Dump and Chase podcast is brought to you by hockeyfan.com, and don't make sure to check out our syndication partner at ohiohockeydigest.com. And if you aren't doing so now, you can hear us every Wednesday at 5:06 p.m. on Western Reserve Radio on the TuneIn or Live 365 app. You can also stream the show on Western Reserve Radio's Facebook and Twitter pages, as well as the Phantoms Facebook page. You can hear old episodes and new on YouTube, as well as wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And of course, be sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I cracked 80 followers now on Twitter. I'm on the march to 100. So, help me out, people. We're getting closer little by little. We're inching closer to 100. So if you're not following there, make sure you do. Now, all of these links can be found in whatever various description of how you're listening to this on our Linktree page, which has been cleaned up and organized. It's a lot easier to navigate now. Spent some time on that. And last but not least, thank you for tuning in and spending a few minutes with us every week. You have no idea how much we appreciate that. So for Justin Irwin, I'm Sam Olmstead. We will talk with you again in 7 days. Bye now.